Welcome to the Sheffield United Way, a chance to look back on our transfer predictions for the beginning of the 24-25 season. And how did myself, Nick, and Ollie do? Well, we're going to begin with goalkeepers. Now, Ollie, I think we'll start with you, then me. And I don't want to embarrass Nick too much, but his suggestion may or may not still be working in professional football. Ollie, who did you pick?
I went with 𝗏𝗏 I thought he'd be a great choice for us to bring in on loan from Brighton. I thought he really would lighten us up. I also thought it was more likely that United would only be going for loan signings, particularly when looking at goalkeepers. So I was very pleasantly surprised to see that we brought in a full-time number one in Michael Cooper. Rushworth himself, he's ended up at Hull, one of the 25 goalkeepers that Hull City have got in the absolute mess that they call a squad building summer. But we'll get more into that, I'm sure, when we start to play against Hull and think more about our game against them. So yeah, I was wrong, but I would have still been happy if Rush would have turned up. But I actually think we have gone better than I originally went for. What about you, Hal? Because I think your number one choice has had an interesting move this summer.
Yeah, so like Carl Rushworth would have been a really good shout. I'd have been happy with that as well. I thought the club would go with a loan, James 𝗍𝗿𝗏, who's returned to Sheffield Wednesday. But I did mention that I wanted Michael Cooper, which I don't think Nick was happy about.
No, Nick was not very happy with that at all because we spoke about what the video was going to be about. We were each going to get one per position. Me and Ollie stuck to that. Hal did not. And I counted exactly how many you picked earlier on. I think it was around 10 overall.
If you didn't watch the prediction video, I didn't pick 10 goalkeepers. I really thought Cooper was the one we should go for. We should make this very clear when we go through this. This is who we thought the club would get, not who we wanted the club to get, which is why I think, Nick, you went with Darren Randolph.
Great choice.
Everybody's going to laugh at me for all my choices here. But at the time, we'd not been... no players have been touted around signing for Sheffield United, other than maybe Jamie Shackleton and I think Sam McCallum were kind of spoken about, but we were nowhere near signing him at that point. So looking at those two players, I'm thinking, do you know what? Some out-of-contract players are probably the best we can hope for. Experienced British and Irish players, which Chris Wilder absolutely loves. Darren Randolph is played for Ireland. He is now, I wrote down a Sky pundit because he's not retired yet, so I can't say he's retired. But I thought we were going to go for someone a little bit more conservative, going out of contract. And I thought that, yeah, we'd pick someone up that had been there and done it all and played a lot of championship games. But obviously, United wanted to go better.
Thankfully. And instead, we've gone and got our new Alan Kelly. Yeah, I said it. All right, let's move on to defenders. I thought it might be fun to go and get Charlie Hughes. He's ended up at Hull City. I really would have liked Charlie Hughes. I think he'll go on to have a really great career. I also threw in the name of Nathan Wood, who's at Southampton. Nick, you went with Paddy McNair, and I got to be honest, that did have Chris Wilder signing written all over it.
Yeah, it did. And I think he was... After we'd made the video, everyone was talking about Paddy McNair. And I think I said on that video that we did before the prediction video that he will be our next signing. I think I went for sort of players that Chris Wilder would have tried to have signed a few years ago, like before we got promoted. And then every fan was thinking, you know what? Every season we're going to be at the top end of the Championship or the bottom end of the Premier League. He's gone to West Brom, and actually I think he'll have a really, really good season. And I would have liked to have seen him at Bramall Lane, but I think we've done better.
Yeah, well, one thing I will mention is we talked about a lot of players here. And one thing we did hit on the money.
We talked about one each, right. Other than...
I talked about a lot of players here. One thing we did all get on the money, really, is these players kind of like all went somewhere. Right, Nick?
Yeah, we were doing this research earlier on. I think there was only 2 players out of the whole list, and Hal did say a lot, that actually left the club that they were sort of... I think some may have been out of contract, but still, even if they're out of contract, they could still re-sign for that club. So I think we've done well in the fact that so many players left those clubs and we could have signed these players.
And Ollie, you wanted Joe Worrell as your defender. Talk me through it.
Yeah, indeed, because I thought Worrell was the kind of profile of player that we'd be looking for. Obviously, we've been rumoured in January as looking to try and bring in a player like Worrell for his leadership abilities. And with Egan leaving, it felt as though it was the right time for us to really push to try and get that kind of player in, particularly when we weren't sure if we were going to be going through this change of system or not. And he's a player who's comfortable in a 4 or at the centre of a 5. So I thought Worrell made a lot of sense. He has ended up at Burnley, so he's dropped down to the Championship as I predicted. He's gone to a relegated team as I predicted. So building on what you were just saying there, Hal, it's very much somebody who we could have gone for, but who we chose not to. Now, I'm happy with Souttar. I think Souttar's a fantastic player. I actually like him a lot more than I like Worrell. But I still think that centre-half is a place where we are so short in terms of the depth at the club that I would have liked to see us go out there and get one of the other names that we've mentioned, because leaving us with 3 senior recognised centre-halves, that's a hell of a risk. So I do think we got better in the one we got, but I don't think getting one was enough.
Yeah, I do think if 𝗚𝗿𝗲𝗵𝐻𝗲 had gone, Joe Worrell, maybe Chris Mepham, those have been the kind of defenders we'd have been looking at. Ollie, we'll stick with you. I think a lot of people would have liked this, and the comments at the time suggested that. 𝗵𝗲𝗕. Now, as we say, not every single player we mentioned ended up moving on. He's one of them.
He is indeed one of them. He felt like he was going to be a really good option. And like you say, I think he would have been a really popular choice to come to Bramall Lane. I think very much he was one who we would have been looking at when we all expected 𝗍𝗍𝗲 to leave. I think very much you can't really have both of them marauding around central midfield, committing fouls and getting booked. You need to have sort of one player who's going to stand out and make that role. And both of these players would have wanted to start. So I can certainly see why we haven't moved for Chowdhury. I'm shocked that nobody has, but maybe he's going to take his opportunity in the Premier League with Leicester still. Maybe he's going to try and kick on to sort of solidify himself in their first team. He might fancy his chances. They might want to keep him around. But either way, I hope he stays on our radar, because I'd still like us to bring him in at some point, because I think he'd be a really popular man down at Bramall Lane if we ever can get him wearing red and white.
Ooh, keep an eye out in January. Now, interestingly, we talk about names that we were then linked with. When we did this, we weren't linked with too many names. I said Mark Leonard would have been an interesting addition, gone to Birmingham, and Lewis O'Brien, who I really thought was tailor-made to one day be a Sheffield United player, but he's gone to America. And Nick, you went with a name that I do think would have actually been a decent addition, and he's doing very well early on at a team that's doing very well. Who did you have?
Well, actually, the funny thing about us picking midfielders, we didn't really end up delving into that too much, because we'd already got a ready-made, very, very good midfield, obviously, other than Callum O'Hare coming in. I think 𝗍𝗍 would have been a good signing as well, in all honesty, as a bit of a backup, but maybe he don't want to be a backup, and that's fine. I went for Alan Brown. I think that this was a big rumour as well, that his name wasn't mentioned directly with Sheffield United, but it was a player that's going out of contract, that's been at a club for a long time, Sheffield United are interested in. And then it came out that Chris Wilder went to watch a player that didn't really put too much effort in the last game of the season, and he didn't like that about that player. And a lot of people saying that Alan Brown did not put a lot of effort in the last game for Preston. So I think this could have been a signing really early on if that all was what it was. So he's gone to Sunderland. Like I say, I'm a big fan of Alan Brown. I always have been. I always will be. I think he'll do very well at Sunderland, and I would have liked to have seen him in a red and white shirt in Yorkshire.
Well, the next player that you picked, Nick, was a striker who's ended up in red and white, but the red and white of Stoke City. Who did you go for?
Well, I don't actually think we said sign for Sheffield United. I think we said just wear a red and white shirt, because I think I've smashed it on pretty much every one of these. No, I went for Sam Gallagher, who was out of contract at Blackburn, and I thought was a Sheffield United player written all over him, because one of those players that doesn't score a lot of goals. We've had a lot of those over the past few seasons, and even before that. He's gone to Stoke City. Good job we didn't try and sign him as well, because he's been injured. The first pre-season game that he played, he got injured like half an hour into the game, and he's not played since. So it's probably a good idea that we didn't sign him, but I thought he would have been a decent signing for us, a bit of a foil for a striker that's going to score a load of goals. I still think he'll do well for Stoke City, but there's a bit of a theme happening here with lots of players going out of contracts. I think I went a bit too literally with predicting this. I was thinking, I've got this nailed. Chris Wilder is going to go for journeyman, experienced Championship players. They're all out of contract. Give me the money. Like, is there any money riding on this?
No. And also,
Ah.
we couldn't have predicted when we talk about money that the likes of 𝗲𝗏𝗚 going to Newcastle for 15 million. If we'd known that was coming, I think we probably would have guessed that maybe Anel, maybe 𝗍𝗍 𝗚𝗍 might have brought some money in. But as it is, they've ended up staying and we've ended up making money from elsewhere. People have wanted to pay for players that were actually surplus to requirements. You know, Benny Traore, another one. And if we'd known we had as much money, perhaps we would have had a very different prediction list. I'd love to next year do the players we actually want to sign. That would be a very different list. Ollie, you obviously thought we were made of money because the striker you predicted was one that it turns out we now could not have afforded, Jay Stansfield.
Yeah, it turns out that I thought, oh, Jay Stansfield would be great. I think at the time, I thought he was coming in on loan, thought he was going to be a fantastic player who could drop into the 10, but also be a man who's out there to get some goals. I don't think anybody would have been predicting that a team in League One would be spending £15 million. And yeah, we very much would have not been in a position to afford that. It is insane that anybody is going out and spending that kind of money, never mind doing it in League One. And, you know, we could all rant about the state of football in 2024, but he's going to go down there. I'm sure he's going to have a fantastic season in League One, and then we'll see what his level is in the Championship next year when he and Birmingham City inevitably come back. But yeah, we it didn't matter who we sold. We were never spending that kind of money bringing a striker in.
No.
But similar to what I said about defenders, though, I do wish we had got one more. I do wish there was another player in there. You know, we're still only talking about 𝗣𝗏𝗴. That means that we're relying once again on Ryan Brewster to be the bags man for Sheffield United this season. And as we've seen over the last 5 years, that always goes really, really well. So let's go, Brewdog.
I mean, it could happen. Yeah, Nick actually sent me some notes before this, and he wrote here, Jay Stansfield signed for Birmingham City for £52 million. And it feels like that because it is silly money. And, you know, you might not want to rant about what's going on in 2024 with football, but on an upcoming video on this channel, I will be doing just that. Ooh, a little tease. And for me, I thought Liam Delap would have been a great shout. I had no idea that he would end up going to the Premier League with Ipswich. That was obviously one that was very unlikely, but thankfully I didn't stop there.
No, you didn't stop there. How many more? Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more players Hal picked.
Right. And it's a good thing
8
I did.
more, that's 9 altogether.
Because if I hadn't picked extra players, none of us would have got a single one right. But luckily, the next striker I mentioned was 𝗣𝗏𝗴. And I had done my research, and a lot of things that I think 𝗣𝗏𝗴 does very, very well, we will see this season. So I did also shout 𝗣𝗏𝗴. There was a few others that I threw in there, and some that I would have liked to have seen Sheffield United sign. I also mentioned one that I had no idea we'd end up being linked with, but we were heavily linked with Tom Cannon. And that was one I mentioned months ago. And I am pleased that we did at least explore that option. It's a shame we didn't get that over the line because, as I think you quite rightly say, Ollie, it would have been absolutely fantastic just to get one more striker through the door. And someone like Cannon would want to prove himself as he hasn't had that many opportunities. And now he probably will get those at Stoke, particularly with Gallagher being injured. So overall, if we just kind of look back at it, I mentioned 𝗣𝗏𝗴, so I'll get a little point there. I mentioned Michael Cooper, so I'll get a little point there. And what have you got to say for yourselves?
I don't think none of that is
If
deserved.
I'd been allowed 25 guesses, I would have got a couple of names on there and all, to be honest.
But you didn't.
I must say that me and Ollie stuck to the rules 4 each. Hal had more than that in his strike. Hal had double that in his strikers.
Yeah, got 2 right.
But what I will say, that
well
I think we'll give you 2 points, Hal. Don't deserve it, but we'll give them you. I think there's some half points given for players that we were heavily linked with. But yeah, I'm not going to count them up right now and bore everyone.
Well, let us know in the comments what you made of this idea. Next season, would you rather see us do the players we want rather than the ones we think? I do think it would have been a very, very different list, although I definitely would have had Michael Cooper mentioned on both of those. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And this is also available as an audio podcast.